guys, in this video I'm gonna show you how to make a super simple bread. It only takes 4 ingredients and no fancy tools or techniques or whatever. If you start your recipe in the afternoon, you will have some deliciously fresh bread the next day. Make sure to watch the whole video before you get started, and yeah, let's crack on. Alright guys, for this bread you need 3 cups of baker's flour. You can mix it up with a wholemeal flour as well to just give it more of a wholemeal taste. You need 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. Usually instant yeast comes in these like tiny plastic sachets, but I bought it in bulk, which is a way more sustainable option. You need about 1.5 teaspoons of kitchen salt, very important for the taste of the bread, and you need about 300 milliliters of tap water. Alright, so we start by adding the salt and the yeast into the flour, into a big bowl, and just roughly mix it up with your hands so the dry ingredients are all mixed. That's all good. And then we'll pour in the water. And again, you'll just mix this up with your hand. Not too long, just so the most of the flour gets wet. It will become like a sticky kind of dough, which is exactly what we need. Try to make sure to get some of the dough off the edges. Alright, once we have this mixture, we just grab a cotton towel and we put it aside for 12 to 18 hours. For us that would be the next morning at room temperature, and yeah, see you back then. Alright, let's have a look at the dough. It should be slightly risen and it should have some bubbles on top of it. Mine does, luckily. As you can see, it looks very different from what it looked like yesterday. If you hold it on the side, you'll see how it's stretching. Here, this is the effect you want to have. Let's grab yourself a nice big board and put a piece of parchment baking paper on top. I use a compostable one that's unbleached. This is a very sustainable option for parchment paper. A lot of the parchment paper in the stores is actually bleached and has this like little layer of non-compostable material on it, and that's definitely not the one you want to use. I'll just move this aside for a sec so you can see what I'm doing. So we'll flour the surface of your parchment paper, because this is where we're going to put our bread or dough on top of. You don't want it to be like floured as if there's like a big pile of flour. It's just a little bit of flour. It's just enough to make the dough not stick to the parchment paper. We'll scrape the dough out of the bowl. And we'll start at the top so it just keeps or stays like one big piece. Here we go, here it comes. And that's our dough. Now we're going to fold it. So you grab the sides, right side first, left side, whatever you prefer. And then you grab the bottom, stretch it out a little, put it on top. And then grab the top. Nothing fancy, you don't want things to look like perfect here. This is all you need. It's folded now. I'm adding a bit more flour. And we're just going to leave it sit with a clean cotton towel for 2 hours. See you in a sec. Now the real fun begins. Our dough is ready to be baked. I've preheated the oven to 230 degrees Celsius. I put the springform pan inside the oven to heat as well, so the dough gets a nice heat from every angle. You can also use a pot that's oven proof. It's even better if it has a lid as well. So I got the springform out of the oven. It's hot, so be careful. And from here it's actually really easy. So you just lift the cotton towel from the dough. It should have risen a bit. It still looks pretty similar to when we left it 2 hours ago. You grab the parchment paper and you simply lift it into the hot springform. Give it a little shake so it spreads equally, but it doesn't have to be all over the springform because it will spread itself out once it's being baked. So the dough is now in the springform. I'm going to put it in the oven for 30 minutes. Make sure to keep an eye on it. You want it to be nice and golden brown. If it gets too dark, you can just fold the parchment paper on top of it, or if you're using a pot, you just put the lid onto the pot. And there you have it, a super simple homemade bread. I baked mine for 40 minutes in total and let it rest for 15 minutes before slicing it. If you've made your own, make sure to share the end result on Instagram and don't forget to tag Plans for Breakfast. You can also find this recipe and more on conscious cooking on plansforbreakfast.com. See you next time!